Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of Ash versus the Evil Wed, where I am the Ash, the Wednesday is pretty evil, and they come together to make this weekly horror movie series as curated by you. Where you tell me what you want to see in the comments section or in the Premiere Chat sidebar, somewhere around here, hello to everyone in there, for horror movie lists basically, on this wonderful channel hosted by this horrible host. What more could you want? What a lovely combination. As for the here and now, this week, since we're all stuck indoors and can't really get out and about and do much, I figured I'd give you some compulsory viewing because everybody loves homework. We all went to school and liked school, didn't we? So here's some homework for you. Set around the lovely Spain because that's kind of like a holiday. It's beautiful vistas, delicious tapas, annual tomato fights, and it also has a heap of horrible horror movies that will scar you for life. So compulsory viewing, homework, and scarring for life. It is truly a horror list. It is truly a horror scary list. So there you go, I hope you enjoy. So without further ado, soy la maestra del infierno, Ash from What Culture, and these are 10 películas de terror españolas que debes ver antes de morir. Oh, and PS, don't forget to check out What Culture Gaming at the end of this video for part 2 of Evil Wednesdays, which is horror-themed video game stuff after this horror-themed movie stuff. Very exciting. Enjoy the video.
10. The Skin I Live In. Pedro Almodovar is a household name when it comes to directors, delivering some of the most pertinent and colourful, in all senses of the word, movies that have made it to cinema screens. The Skin I Live In then is one of his finest, a horror movie that doesn't rely on traditional frights but instead burrows deep into psychological territory and stays wormed into your brain long after watching. The story is one that follows poor Vera, a woman held captive against her will in the home of Dr. Ledgard, who's keeping her there to test his experimental form of skin that is impervious to damage. He's inspired by the loss of life in a flaming car accident, with the plot slowly spiralling outwards to reveal exactly the truth of the relationship between Vera and Ledgard. Starring Antonio Banderas and Elena Anaya at their very best, there is good reason this mind-bending movie won a whole heap of awards. Treat yourself. 9. Julia's Eyes. The fear of being murdered by a knife-wielding madman easily crosses cultural boundaries, because every society has had to contend with the unfortunate reality of serial killers. Spanish horror has easily kept up with the evolving subgenre with its own slasher-inspired films like Sleep Tight. But it is the ingenious Julia's Eyes that stands out from the crowd. Julia's Eyes tells the story of a woman who is slowly losing her sight as she tries to solve the murder of her twin sister. As Julia's vision gets worse, the plot grows more complex, plunging both Julia and the audience into disorienting darkness. The story is complicated in a way that is reminiscent of the best 70s Italian giallo movies, or even Hitchcock. Julia's degenerative eyesight provides the perfect plot device to create maximum suspense, whilst also serving as a metaphor for trust, both romantic and otherwise. Julia's Eyes is smarter than your average bear, if your average bear was a slasher, and brings a subversive new meaning to the old saying, love is blind. Especially if you're willing to, overlook the eyeball terror that'll be thrown in your face. Overlook, eyes, good pun. 8. Veronica. Now, don't sigh at this one. I know everyone is big and strong when it comes to this Netflix horror, but it is still an exceptionally tight movie, and I stand by it, so it's on this list. Insidious and The Conjuring are two of the most successful horror films of the last decade. Both movies follow a simple recipe. Start by putting a child in danger of being possessed or killed by a demon, sprinkle in some based on a true story to help ground the supernatural shenanigans in reality, and add a heaping cup of jump scares. Then we get to Veronica, which throws in its own bag of spice into the mix and makes something new of the whole formula. Opening with a horrifyingly believable emergency phone call from a distraught young girl as police arrive at a home torn to pieces, the movie immediately plants a firm foot in reality before getting to the demon stuff. Flashback to 3 days prior and we learn that 15-year-old Veronica has brought the wrath of a dark spirit upon herself and her family after playing with a Ouija board. Don't play with Ouija boards. Director Paco Plaza, which I will certainly get to more of, is excellent at taking implausible plots and making them feel tangible. Veronica provides plenty of genuinely creepy moments because it just feels so real. 7. Timecrimes. If I told you Timecrimes combines the absurdity of Evil Dead 2 with the complexity of something like Primer, on a scale of 1 to 666, how excited would you be? Very is the answer. Timecrimes tells the story of a middle-aged man named Hector. After a bizarre series of events, including a naked woman and what appears to be a masked killer, Hector finds himself in a time machine and accidentally sends himself back about an hour. He quickly learns that he isn't the only Hector time-traveling about though, as different versions of himself exist every time he goes back in time. The movie is needlessly complicated, but loads of fun to watch, as you try to untwist your mind and make sense of poor Hector's situation. Some have speculated that Timecrimes is a metaphor for the impossible to untangle web of lies created whilst having an affair. Regardless, the movie is a triumph for creating such a high-concept horror flick with no big-budget special effects to work with. 6. The Orphanage. Horror likes to revisit the rose-coloured past with horrifying results. In this story, Laura wants to capitalise on the happy memories of her childhood, so she convinces her husband to invest in the probably worst real estate investment they could ever, an old orphanage. But let's be fair, she has noble plans on turning the building into a home for sick children. Whilst converting the place from creepy to healing, Laura's adopted child goes missing. After months, he is presumed dead, but Laura is seeing apparitions that lead her to believe otherwise. Produced with Guillermo del Toro's hand firmly mixing things up, The Orphanage is a phenomenon. The ominous image of a little boy with a creepy burlap sack mask has become iconic, and has resulted in the second highest grossing debut ever for a Spanish film. If you have not seen it, you are surely in for a bittersweet treat. 5. The Devil's Backbone. The Devil's Backbone is about a young orphan boy who is brought to a foster home with an ominous undetonated bomb firmly planted in the middle of its courtyard. It is not long before the young boy begins to be haunted by the ghost of another orphan child named Santi. After having a terrible experience working with a big Hollywood studio whilst making Mimic, Guillermo del Toro decided to return to his roots. The result is this unbelievably creepy ghost story set against the backdrop of the entire Spanish Civil War. The Devil's Backbone may have borrowed some of the looks of Santi from the pale Japanese ghosts of Ju-on and The Ring, but everything else here is wholly original. With The Devil's Backbone, Del Toro is beginning to marry the complex themes of childhood, war, and national identity with traditional supernatural folklore. Something we will see him return to with a vengeance later in his career, but here it is worked out with incredible talent in the meantime. 4. Thesis. In the wrong hands, a movie with the premise of disease could have turned into a tasteless and unwatchable horror film. Luckily for us though, Disease was the feature film debut of Alejandro Amenabar, who then went on to make Open Your Eyes, The Others, and won an Oscar for The Sea Inside. Needless to say, Thesis packs a wallop. The film follows Angela. She's planning on writing a university thesis on violence in the visual arts, and while she's researching, she stumbles upon an actual snuff film, which sets off a chain of events that threatens her life. Amenabar was a film student at the time he made Thesis, so the movie is made by a film student about film students finding a forbidden film while studenting. The meta nature of the film allows Amenabar to freely criticise the way horror films are made and the way audiences respond to them. As has been said by better critics than me, Thesis has a thesis. It holds up a mirror to the audience, and especially horror fans. Amenabar acknowledges our innate attraction to violence, but he also asks where we should draw the line between entertainment and snuff. 3. The Others. And mentioning Amenabar, the only Spanish movie on this list to be spoken in English, The Others is infamous for its plot twist that comes from a solid hour and a half of slow-burning dread. If you've managed to miss this one and still don't know the end, then get yourself a copy and have a blast. There's something for everyone in this white-hot boiling pot of tension. Starring Nicole Kidman as a mother trying to look after her photosensitive children in a dark, brooding family home, we're already onto a terrifying premise before any ghosts start showing up. And oh boy, the ghosts start showing up, with the kids convinced that their dingy home is being haunted. The Others is a masterclass in anxiety and mystery, expertly molded to be psychologically exhausting without ever stepping into cheap scare territory. And wouldn't you know it, it is because it is another expert piece by Amenabar. 2. Pan's Labyrinth. If you recall, there was some superb foreshadowing earlier in this list about how Guillermo del Toro would return with a vengeance to the themes of The Devil's Backbone later in his career. Well, Pan's Labyrinth is that return with a vengeance. Set in fascist Spain, Pan's Labyrinth tells a dark fairy tale about a young girl named Ophelia. She and her pregnant mother go to live with Captain Vidal, her sadistic stepfather, as he hunts Republic rebels hiding in the countryside. One night, a fairy leads Ophelia to a stone maze where a faun tells her she is the reincarnation of a princess and she must complete 3 tasks in order to return to her kingdom. Oh, Okay, then just the normal stuff that goes on. That's fine. Del Toro again combines the brutality of war and innocence of childhood beautifully, all whilst exploring themes of nationalism, femininity, and death. Visually, Pan's Labyrinth is a treat and truly stunning. From the titular Pan to the horrifying pale man, Del Toro crafts a visual masterpiece, and this film is still the standard of visual effects and cinematography in spite of its age. Pan's Labyrinth is simply one of the best films ever made, and regardless of what argument you want to make about it, it belongs wholeheartedly to the fantastical side of the horror genre. 1. Wreck. Of course, it had to be this at number 1. I love Wreck. When you hear found footage, you know you're either going to get a really creative horror film or just plain old motion sickness. Add zombies into the genre mix and you might begin to roll your eyes. Nothing has been played out over the years quite like these two subgenres, and mashing them together sounds like a bad idea. But this was before our patience for zombies and shaky cam began to wear thin. And Spain gave us one of the best horror movies to belong to either subgenre in Wreck. Wreck unfolds from the perspective of a documentary film crew making a television series about a local fire station. When the station is called to respond to an emergency at a nearby apartment complex, all hell then breaks loose. The tenants are turning into vicious zombies and the building is quarantined, leaving the film crew stuck inside. Frequently popping up on best of lists for both found footage and zombie movies, there is a reason this movie is so beloved. Wreck is a horrific roller coaster ride you will never forget. Paco Plaza's claim to fame that stands as the best of its kind.
And that's our list. Thank you so much for joining me for Ash versus the Evil Wed, and don't forget to check out the House of the Wed over on the gaming channel. They all have hand movements now, excitingly. It's like a dance along at home if you want to join in. I'm losing my mind slowly. But yeah, check out What Culture Gaming for the House of the Wed, which is the horror game version of this. So you've got horror movies, horror games, comes together to make a lovely Wednesday, don't you think, hey? In the meantime, don't forget to like, share, sacrifice your firstborn child to the overlords of What Culture, and subscribe, and I'll see you again the same time next week. Thanks for watching.